What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and we're back today with another live stream in the System Crafters live series. And today we're going to have a couple of fun topics, but I'm just going to wait just a minute for people to file in a little bit here, because I know there's a bit of a delay sometimes when people are starting up the stream. Today's going to be interesting because I'm trying a couple of different things in the streaming setup, and we're going to see how much of a failure that it is. But well, basically what I'm doing is, I think I may have mentioned a couple streams ago, I wanted to try to find a way to make my Emacs performance a little bit better while doing some of these demonstrations in the stream. And one way to do that is to use two computers instead of one. So one computer being my main streaming computer and the other computer being the one that I'm doing the demos on, so that the burden of running the OBS software that I use for streaming isn't actually causing Emacs to appear to be slower than it really is, because it takes up quite a lot of CPU to do all the video encoding and whatnot. So today, for one part of this, I'm going to try to use a second computer to do the demonstrations of the Emacs Native Comp branch, or at least that build of Emacs, and we'll see how it goes. The one thing I don't like about it so far is that the text doesn't look so good. Ellis, do you see the camera laggy? The text doesn't look so clear as it normally does, so I'm not necessarily so happy about that. However, I'm still working on it to try to figure out the right way to deal with that issue. Okay. So anyway, choppy camera. Wow, that's really weird. I don't see it on my end, but then again, I'm not watching the stream. Okay, let's see. I wonder what the CPU is doing at the moment. Oh boy. You know what? I bet I know why. It's because I got two capture devices on at the same time. Ah, great. Okay. You know, maybe I will try to turn off one of them at the same time. Piotr, I would do that, but I'm using a laptop for streaming, which is probably the dumbest thing I could possibly do, but that's where we're at right now. Okay, so once I get the screen displayed, like right now, maybe the choppy camera won't seem so bad. Then maybe it won't be too distracting. I might actually try to turn off one of the devices when I'm not using it, so it doesn't look so bad. Then that might help. Okay, so anyway, first of all, I'd like to say hello to the people who are here today: Drashal, Crime Time, Simon, Piotr, Mark, Igor, Rune, Martin, Adrian, Ellis. Let's see, who else is here? Jonathan, both Jonathans, Jonathan Siegel and Jonathan G, Parimal, Mary, Yuri. Thanks all for being here. Yuri, no, I'm actually, yeah, that's a good question, actually. I'm using a second computer and I'm connecting it via HDMI to this current machine using a capture device. So that's probably why one of them is slow, is because I actually have two HDMI capture devices hooked up to this laptop. So I think the CPU is probably crying at the moment. Hi, Erica. So I'm hoping that in the future I will, like, maybe I'll build a desktop machine or something to do streaming with that is a little bit more performant to deal with all this stuff. Hey, Joseph, because this is I think I'm reaching the limit of what you can do with streaming on a fairly powerful laptop. So let's see what we can do about that in the future. All right, so let's see what else is on the agenda. So yeah, like excuse me, Jesus, I can't speak. So if you haven't seen the annoying nagging message from Nightbot, basically I'm asking if you have a moment, just click the like button on the stream, because apparently while you're live, if people like the stream while it's live, it will help the YouTube recommendation algorithm promote it to other people. So if you can take a moment to like close a live chat box if you're on mobile or something, and then click like, then that'd be really helpful for the stream. Interesting. Okay, so let's get started. So today, I wonder if I should switch to the other computer to do this because we're gonna have to do the demonstrations there. Let's stick here for now. So maybe you've heard about this, maybe you haven't, but today we're gonna talk a little bit more about it. There is an effort going on in the Emacs world to basically improve the performance of Emacs drastically. And that is basically this new branch that has been in development for about a year. There's a person named Andrea Corallo who has been working on this. And effectively what it does is whenever you load Emacs Lisp into Emacs, normally what happens is it will either interpret that Emacs Lisp code as it is being run, or it might compile that to bytecode. And if you don't know what bytecode is, it's basically an intermediate representation of the code that you've loaded that is actually faster to run in like a virtual machine, and you could call the Emacs Lisp runtime a virtual machine of sorts. But still, since the bytecode is still being interpreted by the runtime, so it's still not as fast as it could be as if it was like compiled machine code, so made into a fully native binary. So this, yeah, someone noticed the new fonts. I'll talk about that in a minute too. So the idea is that if you could just take that Emacs Lisp code and compile it to native code, then you would get a huge performance increase whenever you're running things in Emacs. Either the built-in Emacs Lisp packages, which there's a ton of them because a lot of Emacs core functionality is written in Emacs Lisp, or the third-party packages that you install. So, you know, some of the larger packages you can install, like Magit or org mode, or others like that. You know, they have quite a lot of code, and if you can make that code run faster, then you're going to have a better overall experience in Emacs. So there has been a lot of effort being put into making this happen, where you could load in Emacs Lisp code and have it be compiled dynamically at runtime into native code, which runs much faster than the current code execution that's being done in Emacs, at least from Emacs 27 and below. This basically using a library called libgcc-jit, where JIT stands for just-in-time compiler. Basically, that's like that sort of on-demand compilation to native code. This library gives a lot of the same functionality as the GCC compiler tool chain to basically take some intermediate representation of code and then compile that to native binary output. So this is a pretty interesting effort that's been going on for a while, and I think a lot of people have been using it and having pretty good success with it. In fact, this week I've also started using it, and it's not on this computer right now, but it's going to be on the other one that I'm going to switch to in a moment. I've also been using it on my other computer that I use for daily development too. So basically, I think it's to the point now where you could definitely use it on a daily basis. It may not natively compile all of the code that you use in Emacs, but it will do a lot of it. I think a lot of the code that I'm using is actually being natively compiled. And I have noticed an increase in performance of doing normal tasks in Emacs, like switching buffers or opening files, or, you know, building my org agenda. A lot of different things that normally would feel a little bit laggy, now do not feel laggy at all. So I think that there's going to be a huge improvement to the overall feel of using Emacs by using this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how you can actually get this and try it out for yourself. And also we're going to try to do some benchmarks to see like an actual number that will tell us whether the natively compiled Emacs code is faster or not. But before the stream, I wasn't able to get a reliable benchmark working, so we may have to actually try to figure it out a little bit live, but I've got a couple options we could try to use to do that, so hopefully that will actually work all right. So let me answer a couple questions here. So people are asking if I'm using new fonts. Yes, I did switch fonts because there was some change to the Fira Code Mono font that I've been using for a long time, and the font weight got messed up somehow. It started looking thicker, so I was like, okay, well, I need to find a new code font. So I switched to JetBrains Mono, which I quite like for the monospace font, and I've also switched to the Iosevka AILE, A-I-L-E, for the variable pitch font that I'm using here. So things are going to look a little bit different now. Hopefully it's not too jarring to the people who are used to the other fonts I was using before, but it's kind of funny because, you know, when you're using a text-centered interface like Emacs, just a change in font like makes it look way different. So that's kind of a cool thing, I guess. Let's see, who else joined up today? Hi, Hanekawa, Ramses, Jerry. Yeah, I think that's everybody else. So let's take a look at how we can get this Emacs Native Comp branch, and feel free to ask questions anytime. I may not be explaining things very well, so definitely let me know if I can do a better job at that. So basically, one thing that's happened relatively recently is that originally the code for the Emacs Native Comp functionality was being developed in a separate fork from Emacs, but I think maybe within the last few months, they've actually created a branch in the real Emacs repo to do the development on this feature to get it ready to be merged into the actual mainline Emacs code base. So if you want to clone the code, I guess I could take one step backward and explain to you that there's not really a binary for this right now. Like I think that in most cases, if not all, you're gonna have to compile the Emacs Lisp code either yourself or using a package in your distribution. So I believe that there is a package in the Arch Linux AUR to compile this. There's definitely a package in Geeks that I'll show you in a moment. So you might want to check to see if there's a package already available for your Linux distribution if you're using Linux. If you're on Windows and Mac OS, I don't think there's any precompiled binaries right now, so you'll definitely have to build it yourself. So just to know that in advance, basically, since this is such a new functionality and not official yet, you'll still have to build it for yourself in most cases. To do that, you'd want to clone the Git repository for Emacs, and notice at the end here that I am using the -b feature/native comp branch name. So basically you're cloning the repo, but automatically switching to this feature/native comp branch because this code is only in a branch right now. So then to build it, you basically just follow the build instructions in the install file inside of the Emacs repo, which basically gives you all the options that you might want to turn on, like basically any kind of image file support or any other kinds of functionality that you might want whenever you're doing the build of Emacs. Now, the difference is that you need to add a couple extra things to get all the benefits of native comp. First of all, you need to turn on the native compilation functionality by using this -- with native compilation parameter to the configure command. So you'll see in the install doc, there's a lot of -- with - whatever parameters that are basically turning on features. This is another feature that you need to turn on whenever you're configuring Emacs to be compiled. Another thing that you want to do is use this native full AOT = 1 environment variable when you run make. Basically, you can add it to the beginning of the command line for invoking make, or you can just set the variable in your shell and then run make. And what this does basically is cause all of Emacs' own inbuilt Emacs Lisp code to be compiled to native during the compilation process of Emacs, so that it doesn't have to happen afterward whenever you start Emacs for the first time. It can actually save you a lot of time in your first boot of Emacs after building this. So I definitely recommend doing that. So I think, was it Ellis said that there's a few different options on the AUR for building Emacs Native Comp, but they're 2 recommended, and some of them aren't necessarily very good, so you might have to try it. Apparently in Homebrew and macOS, there's a flag that you can add for Emacs Plus. So there's apparently an Emacs Plus package. So let's see if I can pull that up really quickly, because that would be helpful. I didn't actually try this on macOS yet, so I'm not sure. Homebrew, Emacs Plus, and D12 Frosted, nice. Okay, so Emacs Plus is another formula for Emacs on macOS. Probably it's better in a lot of ways, which is cool. So did they mention native comp here? Yeah, so you can use the -- with native comp when you install from Homebrew, apparently, it seems, which is great. So if you're using macOS, this seems to be a good option for that. I'm going to drop that into the show notes also. And then I'll put this on the description. After the show's over, I'll put the show notes in the description below so you can see all this stuff, because there's a lot of text that you might want in this episode. So we'll put it all here. Okay, so building on Windows is a little bit more tricky if you want to use Emacs on Windows. Typically, you need to, hey Alex, typically you need to use the MSys2 distribution of the GNU toolchain. If you've never used MSys2 before, you might have heard of it called Cygwin. Basically, it is a port of all the GCC compilation toolchain plus a lot of other Linux programs over to Windows. And you can also build Emacs pretty easily inside of that and then run it as a normal Windows application. There's a Reddit post that showed up, I think yesterday even, that was talking about how to build Emacs 28 with Native Comp on Windows. So definitely take a look at this post. Like I said, I'll put this in the show notes so that you are able to find that later. But it does require some extra steps because you basically have to install a lot of packages in MSys2 first to have all the necessary dependencies before you can compile it. So just keep that in mind whenever you try to do this on Windows. There's some extra steps that may be required. I mean, obviously, you would have to install packages on Linux as well, but most of those are already there, I think. Just checking the chat here. Also, Crime Time mentioned something here, the Pgtk port. So you've probably also heard of Pgtk along with Native Comp mentioned quite often. Something I didn't really cover here, and I don't have a build of Emacs with it yet to show you, but the idea is that Emacs actually is designed in a way where you can have multiple different user interfaces that connect to the sort of core runtime of Emacs. And you can obviously tell that's the case whenever you see both the terminal mode of Emacs and the graphical mode of Emacs in X Windows or X11, whatever you want to call it. However, someone has gone and made a new front end for Emacs using pure GTK, the GNU toolkit, or is it GNOME toolkit? I don't know which one it is, but GTK, which is one of the common user interface frameworks in Linux. They've basically made a port of Emacs that works purely with GTK controls and user interface elements. And the primary reason for this is so that it works natively inside of the Wayland windowing system, or I don't really know the right way to say that. Yes, good thing to note there, Ellis. So basically, you would want to use this if you need to use Emacs inside of Wayland. Like say for instance, if you use GNOME 3 in Wayland mode, or if you use like Sway WM, which is a Wayland-based tiling window manager. If you use Emacs there, there's two ways you can use Emacs in that situation. One is you can use the sort of X Windows compatibility layer in Wayland to run a normal X app, or you can have a Wayland native program like the Pgtk build of Emacs that can load natively into Wayland and basically run in that environment without any kind of translation layer. From what I understand, it does make the user interface feel faster in Emacs, so it might be worth a try if you want to just experiment with a different sort of build of Emacs. And apparently, if you use native compilation plus Pgtk, it may feel even faster than that. So maybe that's a future idea for a packaged build of Emacs, is basically to have native comp plus Pgtk to make it a much faster experience. I don't really know if you lose anything whenever you switch to using Pgtk. P in this case just stands for pure, so I think it's just GTK. It's a GTK build of Emacs. So it might be an improvement for the future to sort of get rid of some of this old deadweight baggage of Emacs from the older window management systems and whatnot. So it would be interesting to tell how that's going to improve things over time. Ellis says it's noticeably faster. Crime Time says Pgtk also allows the use of GTK Broadway, Emacs in the browser. That sounds interesting. Oh, and the last thing to mention, if you do try to use the Pgtk build, it will not work with EXWM because EXWM depends on the X11 or Xorg, whatever you want to call it, the APIs. So it's not going to work it won't allow you to use that as a window manager. And as Piotr says, no EXWM is bust for me. Yeah, for me too at the moment. But, we've been talking here and there, and other people in the community have been talking about the possibility of porting the functionality of EXWM over to Wayland, which would be kind of interesting because maybe there's some benefits to that, but there's also drawbacks if you don't know much about Wayland. Basically, it's a more locked down desktop display protocol for good reasons, basically so that people can't easily screen scrape your screen or do things they shouldn't be doing. It provides more privacy for the user in some ways or protection, but it also makes it harder to do certain things like screen sharing and whatnot. So it's something that's still being developed actively. I think it's pretty far along, but I haven't used it in a while, so I don't have an opinion on it at the moment. So let's see. So sorry, that was a bit of a tangent on Pgtk and Wayland, but let's move on ahead now to one last little tip here. So if you're using Geeks, one thing I found recently is there is a repository called, well, it's Flat Watson's Geeks channel. He calls it the Flat repository. So if you go and add this channel to your Geeks channel configuration, then you can easily install the Emacs Native Comp package that will install libccgit version 10 and the Emacs Native Comp build. But it does take about an hour and a half, at least in my experience, to get through that whole build. So definitely do this whenever you have a few moments and you don't mind having your computer at 100% CPU for that amount of time, because it is a pretty intensive process rebuilding all these things. After that, though, it does work pretty well. I've been using it without much issues, so it's been great for me. So yeah, that's that. So let's switch over to the other machine really quickly and see if we can start trying to do some of this benchmarking that I talked about. So I'm gonna switch to machines right now. I want you to see if you can notice the difference in the fonts as soon as I do it. So keep watching it. All right, we're switched. Did you notice? Now I'm gonna move one laptop on top of the other so I can actually type on it. All right. Okay, so let's try to see if we can do some benchmarking with Emacs Native Comp. As you can see, I am in EXWM, just the same as on the other machine right now. And if we look at the features variable, someone can remind me if there's a better way to do this. But if you search for native in here, Native Comp is listed. So we do have a build of Emacs with Native Comp installed, which is great. So what we're going to do is try to run some benchmarks. I had something that I was putting together from this Emacs wiki post on Emacs list benchmark. But the funny thing is, when I actually ran it, it didn't seem like the natively compiled version of the function that I'm running for the benchmarking is any faster. So, yes. Oh, wow. Did it actually lock up? That's interesting. So the other PC is showing, but I could see that the screen is not actually updated. Let me see if I can fix that really quickly. Give me 1 second. You didn't miss anything so far, so that's a good thing. Not really. All right, so I turned it off, back on. It's not updating still. Yeah, I think that this is taxing the computer a little bit too much at the moment. You're seeing the right machine, it's just it's not updating. Yeah. Control G is not the problem here. I actually see the screen updating in front of me, but I can see on the OBS software that's not doing anything. So I basically need to try to, let me just disable it. Tell me if you see the screen go black right now. Now I'm gonna try to switch this around and hopefully this doesn't completely bring the stream down, but we'll see what happens. So that's 2.4. 2.4. This is gonna be really nice if this doesn't actually work at all. Yeah, it's black. Okay, so let me actually, okay, so I might lose audio, so 1 second. I'm gonna try to unplug this device and plug it back in. If I can figure out which plug it's plugged into. There it is. Test. Test, test, test. Okay, I think it's working now. I can see the audio moving, so it should be working now. All right, so this is why I shouldn't be experimenting with different things without trying it out on a test stream first, but I couldn't have really predicted that to happen. All right. So anyway, what I was saying before, which you probably did not hear at all, was that I was preparing some benchmark work here to show the comparison between running normal Emacs 27 and then Emacs 28 with the native comp functionality built in. So what I found is that it didn't actually show up in running this particular benchmark that I copied over from the Emacs list, or say the Emacs wiki. I can actually try to run that right now just to see what it does and give you a little example of how that looks. So there's a cool command that's built into Emacs called benchmark run. And what this does is basically take some body of code inside of the expression and will run it some number of times. So in this case, it's running this 1,000 times. And then at the end, it will tell you how much time it took to run that. So let me just run this really quickly. We're going to run this block of code. I think this does something like bubble sort or something. It's just some sorting algorithm as a way of example. So I'll use Control X, Control E, and it will run that example. It's running it about 1,000 times. And then at the end, it comes to the bottom and says 2.18 seconds, basically. Now, there is an alternative version of benchmark run that does byte compilation of the same code and will do the same benchmark, basically. So benchmark run compiled is set to 1,000. And if I run this, Control X, Control E, then it finishes in 0.85 seconds. Now that's byte compilation, that is not native compilation. So you can already see that byte compilation of code significantly increases the speed of it. And in most cases, whenever you're installing packages in Emacs, they're gonna end up getting byte compiled anyway, because you're using a package manager like package.el or whatever that is going to do that process for you. So you're getting benefits from that in Emacs 27, Emacs 26, and even further back, because byte compilation has been there for a while. But what we want to see today is whether native compilation provides any benefits. And one thing that Ellis just mentioned is that setting the comp speed variable may actually help with the native comp speed. So we're going to try that too, but just give me 1 second. Okay, so to do native compilation of the same code, I can use the new native compile function. And this function basically, I need to fix that a little bit. The native compile function basically will take the either a function body or a symbol containing a function or a file path that has functions in it, and it will do native compilation of the code and then give you back the code so that you can then run it. So what we're going to do is run native compile on that same Lambda and see if the execution speed is faster than byte compilation. So what we're going to do is run that, and we're going to save it into this DW compiled benchmark, which basically just keeps it inside of a function. So Control X, Control E, and this weird output basically tells us that it did finish the compilation. And I'm going to use the same benchmark run compiled and run it 1,000 times again, and use fun call to actually invoke that function stored in the variable. If you've seen the Emacs Lisp series, you probably remember that. Control X, Control E, and this says 0.8. So not very much faster than the byte compiled version. We can run that again right here and see this 0.85. So very little difference there. However, with more cycles, then probably it would have a more of a variance in the speed. But now let's actually try that comp speed variable that Ellis mentioned. So set q comp speed. So let me actually pull up the documentation for that. I need to do that in a way that doesn't show up in the wrong screen. Let's do this. Whoops. Did I close that window? That's going to be really annoying if I did that. Anyway, we'll put up here. And let me see if I can get my chat back. Gotta love it. Pop out chat. All right, so let's tear this out. Drop it on workspace 1. All right. So here we are. Okay, finally we're good. Okay, so now let's look at the comp speed documentation one more time if it's still here. Comp speed, there it is. Okay, sorry for that. So What it seems like is that if you use comp speed of 0, there's no native compilation, or native compilation happens, but there's no optimization happening on it. If you set it to 1, it's light optimizations. 2 is max optimization level, fully adherent to the language semantic. And then 3 is maximum, and it might be unstable. So basically, we're going to try 2, and we already did try 2 because apparently this value is set to 2 right now. But we're going to try 3 next to see if it makes any difference. So let's set that to 3. And then we are going to hit that, set Q3. All right, so now let's run it one more time and see what happens. Okay, 0.82. Doesn't seem to actually... Oh, no, wait. I have to recompile the function. All right, so I'm recompiling that function now with comp speed 3. Now I'm going to run it one more time. 0.78. So apparently it did actually make a difference, which is great because it proves that something is happening. So, and as Crime Time says, to quote Sonic, gotta go fast. Let's see. So 0.9 on the byte compile version this time. Also... let's see, what was I was going to do? Let's increase the cycles. So let me increase this to maybe 3,000, and I'll increase the byte compile version to 3,000 as well. So I'm going to go and run the byte compile version with 3,000 cycles this time. Excuse me. And that's 2.81 seconds. Now if I run this compile version 3,000 times, it gives us 2.38. So there is definitely an increase in speed. It's not very visible in this particular example. However, I think that whenever you're going about your day-to-day tasks, you will definitely notice there's like, milliseconds of increase in speed in doing common operations, and it is perceptible. So it's interesting to think about how this is going to make the feel of using Emacs improve going forward, because a lot of what people say about Emacs is, oh, it's kind of slow, you're doing things in Emacs and it just doesn't feel really fast, like Vim is way faster, whatever. I think that we're going to get to a place now where Emacs is going to feel very fast, and it's going to be more compelling for people to want to use it for more than just a text editor, and using it for like a desktop environment, or at least like the central place where they do most of their computing tasks, sort of like how I do. It will make it feel a lot better, and you won't get really as annoyed with the sort of minute slownesses that happen as you sort of move through your day-to-day tasks. Like for me, sometimes switching buffers can kind of feel slow. Also, tangling my org mode files can feel slow. That's one thing that has been a little bit annoying. So I don't actually do asynchronous tangling of my org mode configuration files. I do it synchronously on save. So sometimes when I switch buffers, because I have super save turned on, it automatically saves a buffer whenever I switch to another buffer or switch to another window. So then that switch of buffer takes like 3 seconds to do the whole tangle. Now with Native Comp, it actually is a lot faster. So that's another benefit there. So all these common things that you do every day are going to feel faster, and it's going to be more pleasant to use. So it's really a game changer for Emacs, because it's the same functionality you already had. It's just faster now. So it's a really big deal. So Lucas says, a lot of that feeling may come from weird defaults, e.g. only recently did I realize that projectile didn't enable caching by default. Yeah, I mean, there are various things in your own personal Emacs configuration that could cause things to be slower, and you're wondering, why is Emacs so slow? It could just be a config issue. But one of the problems in Emacs is sometimes it's hard to figure this stuff out, and you don't really learn these things until you've read a lot of blogs, or spent a lot of time on Reddit, or in IRC, or in the System Crafters Discord, or whatever, and you've heard of all of these things that you sort of need to know that aren't obvious from the outset. So that could be seen as a downside, but it also means that there's always new stuff to learn and new cool things to figure out. So I don't know, I see it as a good and a bad thing. Let's see. Ella says Pgtk plus native comp is a big step. I would like to try that. Maybe in another stream I'll try the Pgtk version, because I think there is a package for that on that repo that I'm using. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. I'm using JetBrains Mono and also the IOSevka font for the variable pitch fonts. Anything else here? Igor says, I guess it's a directly mapped to GCC CLang-O optimization options. That's what I also think. I think it also is basically mimicking those, because this optimization parameter is probably getting passed directly to libgcc-jit, which is definitely going to use the same kind of optimization strategies as GCC. So it makes sense that would be the case. Hugo says, Benchmark is a bit misleading because an Emacs standard library is already natively compiled. That is a good point, actually. However, this code that I'm running is not natively compiled by default. So this actual code here is not necessarily faster. However, that's a good point. Actually, let's pull up Emacs 27 and see how fast this runs in Emacs 27 without the core being natively compiled. That's a great point, actually. So let's see if I can pull that up really quickly. I'm going to use the Emacs from scratch configuration. I'm also going to use the normal Emacs package. So since I've already got Emacs, let's see, read link, which... So this is the Emacs Native Comp build that the Emacs command is currently pointing to. So I'm going to use geeks to pull in the other one. So geeks, environment, ad hoc, Emacs. So now I should be able to pull in the real 27.1 Emacs here. So let's see if that's actually the case. Oh, is Emacs not actually showing up? Which Emacs? Okay, so that seems to be right. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is run the Emacs from scratch config really quickly. No, I don't want to update packages. No, I don't want to update packages. Thank you again for the annoyance. All right, so I'm going to copy over that code here for the benchmark. And we're going to get a real look at the comparison between byte compiled code running in Emacs 27 and Emacs 28. Hey, Mitchell, thanks so much for the $15 donation in Super Chat. I really appreciate it. He asks, I'd love a video sometime on optimizing Emacs for those of us stuck on Windows 10 and your thoughts on WSL versus native app. Yeah, I have to use Emacs on Windows 10 from time to time, and it really feels so much slower. So I would also like to know the answers to this question. So that's a great point. I will do a video on that for sure. All right, so drop this into Emacs list block. Okay, so what we're going to do now is run the same code 3,000 times in Emacs 27 and see how long it takes. Running it now. Running. Okay, 3.76. And that's compared to running it in Emacs with native compilation. If I run this again, then it is 3.01. So that's, almost a second faster, which is, quite good. And that's only 3,000 cycles of running the same thing. So I feel like over the long term, this is going to be an improvement, a major improvement in speed on everything. Mary says Emacs runs so well in WSL2. That would be great if it did. And you can use an X11 server to connect to that. The reality is if you went that far, you could really run EXWM in there, I think. But you wouldn't be able to put like Notepad or other Windows applications in EXWM. It would be like a separate environment. Garjola says, run it again to see the variance. Let's see. So let's run the other one again, 3,000 cycles. .82. That's the Emacs 27 build, and this is the Emacs 28 build. Running it again. 2.91. So yeah, still about a second of difference, I think. Okay. Oh, Mary, sorry about that. Let me see if I can show your... Wow, it didn't even show up at all. Sometimes the chat is very aggressive when it comes to removing things. It thinks that are spam, so that's not very cool. Okay, let's put this back to comp speed 2 and recompile this function one more time, because 2 is what you start off with by default. So we're running it again with comp speed 2, and the speed is 2.82 compared to, whoops, end of file during, 2.82 for the native comp versus 3.96. So it's great, I think. I mean, it's a very, very good improvement compared to Emacs 27. There were some other benchmarks we could try. I don't really know if it's worth it because I think we've sort of proven the point at this point that, there is an actual measurable increase in speed in running natively compiled Emacs Lisp code compared to the byte compiled code inside of Emacs 27. So definitely something to look out for. Now, the next question you may have is, when is it coming? When are we actually going to get this in Emacs to where we can use it on a daily basis without having to compile it ourselves? So there's actually been a lot of activity happening on this week, it seems. There was a commit that was made to the the feature native comp branch, and I want to say thanks to Undecided in the System Crafters Discord for pointing this out. So if we go look at this commit, basically what we'll see is that Eli Zaretsky, the main maintainer of Emacs at this point, I think, has added a news entry into this branch to say that Emacs now optionally supports native compilation of Lisp files. You have to use that with native compilation parameter to get that functionality. So basically what that tells us is that in Emacs 28.1, this functionality is going to be in the code base of Emacs. However, it will not be turned on by default. So it means that if you want it, you're going to have to find a build of Emacs that has it turned on. However, I think that if Linux distribution maintainers, if people generally think that it's stable enough to have this turned on by default, then many Emacs packages in Linux distros may have it turned on by default, which means you may get that feature by default in your package in your Emacs distro, in your Linux distro. So in Geeks, I would say there's a fairly good chance it'll be turned on by default because there's a lot of Emacs fanatic people in the GNU Geeks community, so it's very likely there. Probably pretty likely in Arch Linux, maybe not as likely in Ubuntu because they're more stability focused, but who knows, maybe it will be the case that they'll do that. So it's kind of interesting to think that this may actually be coming to us as a mainline feature in Emacs within the next major release version. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think Emacs 27.1 came out, I want to say, what was it, like a year ago almost? And generally Emacs seems to be on about a yearly cadence or somewhere to that effect on major version bumps. So I believe that we may see this in the wild pretty soon as official builds. So the other thing is that the creator of the native comp branch and all this work that was done, Andrea Corallo, tweeted yesterday that Eli is working on the GCC Emacs native comp. He's basically reviewing the code and preparing it with the goal of having it merged into master. So that basically also just confirms that we are going to see the code in the master branch of Emacs, meaning that it will be a part of the main distribution, at least to be compiled. And like I said, it may not be turned on by default in your distro, but it can be. So that's definitely good news, I think. I didn't think this was going to happen. For all the communication I was seeing about the native comp branch in the past, 5-6 months, it sounded like this is something we might have seen in Emacs 29 and not in Emacs 28. Now, it may be that they turn it on by default fully in Emacs 29, but it's still good that there's a high chance we'll see it turned on in a lot of places in Emacs 28.1. So it's a very cool thing. A lot of chatting going on here that I don't really get to see all of it. So anyway, any other questions people have related to Emacs Native Comp? I know that it would be better if I would show you how to compile this yourself today, but the thing is, it would take so long and it would basically bog down the stream that it wouldn't be worth it. So if you want to have some help in compiling the Emacs Native Comp branch, you can either ask questions on Reddit on the our Emacs subreddit, or you can come to the System Crafters Discord, check the link in the description or in the chat box, and join us up there, and we should be able to help you get it built, because I think that there's probably just a common invocation you can use for configuring the build and then running the make on that, and you should be able to get it up and running. Well, one other thing that I will mention to you is that it's a little bit annoying at first when you open Emacs for the first time after having installed this. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm using straight.el and if package.el will do the same thing, but when you open Emacs the first time for the first time when you run the native comp build, it's going to try to start doing all the compilation of all your existing package code into native code in the background. But one thing that happens, which you haven't really seen here today because I've already gone through all of it, is that there's a warnings buffer that will keep popping up at the bottom of the screen, and it will be telling you basically all of the output from compiling things. Some things will compile, some things won't, but it's going to keep popping up until all of your Emacs Lisp files have been compiled. I found that to be a little bit annoying. It's not the native comp branch's fault per se. I think it's just because these are compiler warnings. I don't know if there's a way to turn that off. Maybe somebody in the chat knows how to turn it off, but it can be a little annoying at first. However, once the compilation process is finished, you won't see it very often anymore. The only time that you will see it is whenever you load a package that hasn't been compiled yet. Like for instance, if you open a file that has a mode that turns on that doesn't get turned on very frequently, you might see that message pop up again, but it's not that bad after the first run. You'll probably see it again after you upgrade any packages, so keep an eye out for that. But straight.el and package.el in Emacs 28 both have built-in behavior for automatically compiling your packages. However, I do think that there's a variable you have to set for package.el to make sure that it compiles the packages correctly. That is package native compile. So this is a variable that is in the package.el package. You have to set this to true before it will automatically do native compilation of your packages. So straight.el does it by default out of the box. Package.el does not. So just keep that in mind. Any packages you install third party, you will need to turn, if you want them to be compiled, whenever they get installed or loaded, you need to turn on package native compiled to true to make that happen. David asks, am I running 28.1 with native comp right now? Yes, I am. So you can see it actually works with EXWM, which is a good sign. I did see one weird error yesterday, one time when I logged into my desktop, where it gave some kind of XELB error, but then I couldn't use EXWM at that point, but then I logged out and logged back in and it was fine. So I don't know what that was, if it was just like a little blip. Mark has this variable, comp async report warnings errors. Let's see, comp async report warnings errors. This is set to true. If you set it to false, it won't pop up that buffer. So that's great. Thanks a lot, Mark, for that. I know Ellis is also looking for it. So let me see if I can just drop this in here so that you can all have it later. So silencing the errors. Okay. Cool. So that's pretty much it for what we wanted to cover for Native Comp branch today. I mean, I'm very excited. I think it's going to be great whenever this is sort of a full-time thing for everyone. But if you want the benefits of this today, you can have it, and it is fairly stable. The only time it has crashed for me when I was trying to run a different benchmarking package, but I think that may be something else. It may not be the Native Comp branch's problem. So I think that it's fairly stable at this point. I'm going to be using it on a day-to-day basis, and I'll be able to tell you whether it is stable over time. You know, if you see me complaining about it, then you'll know that it's not so good. But for now, I think it's good. Alrighty, so the next thing I wanted to talk about today was we've been talking a little bit in the Discord this week. I mean, a couple people have brought it up about the Eglot package for Emacs. So in this channel so far, we've talked about LSP mode and DAP mode quite a bit. Because they give you a very rich functionality for integrating languages and language servers into Emacs for development of code. Basically what they do is give you code completion, finding references or definitions of symbols, documentation strings, a lot of functionality like that to be displayed in the editor. So basically it makes Emacs into more of an IDE, or more similar to current IDEs than it is without that functionality. So there is an alternative to LSP mode called Eglot, and it also is a client for the language server protocol. And it's been in development for quite a while as well. I actually did use this maybe a couple of years ago. Matthew says that he's currently in the process of replacing LSP with Eglot right now. So the biggest difference between LSP mode and Eglot is that Eglot attempts to use the inbuilt user interfaces for a lot of the same functionality for IDEs. You may not already know this, but there's quite a few things in Emacs that are packages built in that are meant for IDE-like functionality, like iMenu or LDoc or xref. There's a few packages that do a lot of the same things, like giving you documentation strings, or being able to let you select from symbols in a file, or going to navigating definitions, etc. I mean, obviously there's completion at point. There's a whole completion system built into Emacs. So there's a lot of stuff that's already there that we could be making use of. And the thing about LSP mode is that they have invented their own UI for certain things, which is good because there's some more complex features of language servers that you might want to use, like having, you know, code actions in the buffer, or code lens, things that are popping up in the buffer, a lot of different things like that that are more advanced functionality that you might find in something like VS Code. However, a lot of people may not really care about having all that extra user interface. Maybe they want something more minimal, and Eglot is an option for that if you don't want to have something that like basically adds so much extra UI to Emacs. If you want something that works more natively with what is in the box in Emacs, Eglot could be a good option for you. So today what we're going to do is just try to set it up. I haven't done this in a while, so we're going to see whether it works or not. And then we're going to try to walk through the functionality a little bit to see what we can find out. I'm going to do this with a TypeScript project, similarly to how we did in the LSP mode videos, just because it's something I have sitting around, and I know that the language server works pretty well. So we'll give it a shot. I'm also, yeah, I was going to do this in Emacs from scratch config, but I don't want to have to full screen Emacs to be able to use it. So I'm just going to try to do it here instead. So I will try to install this from straight. I may have already done that. Let me see if this loads up. Control X, Control E. Nope, it's not here. So let's pull it from straight. So those of you who are wondering why I haven't covered straight.el yet, I'm definitely going to cover it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But I am using it for my own purposes, and it works great. So I definitely think it's an improvement over package.el. Okay, now we've, whoops, let's see, what's going on here? Can't load. Debugger entered, blah, blah, blah. Probably it will still work. Oh, geez, come on. See, this is the thing I was telling you about. This warning thing keeps popping up. Let me just turn this setting off, and maybe it'll go away. All right. All right, so Eglot, let's see. Okay, it seems to be loaded, so at least we can try to use it. Okay, so what we're gonna do first, this is the reason why I wanted to use the Emacs from scratch config, because I'm gonna have to remove the hooks that I have to turn on LSP mode. So you might have to bear with me for a moment to remove this. So let's see, I'm gonna look up the, geez, I wish I could set that up really quickly. Maybe I can. Display buffer. This might be a problem, but let's see what happens. I would like it if it works. So Control H, Control HV TypeScript mode hook. It didn't work. Okay, so at least it's going to be easy to take this out. Let me just use setq TypeScript mode hook, and I'm going to put in rainbow mode. So that I'm basically just getting rid of LSP here because I don't want LSP mode to turn on when I open a TypeScript file. So let me see if I can open one now. Projects, code, hack panel, source, server, index.ts. Yeah, let's not apply that. I don't know what's in there. Okay, so it looks like LSP mode is not on currently. Great. So what I want to do here is just try to run Eglot. So let's just run, I think it's Eglot enable. Ensure. No, it's not that either. Let's look at the docs really quickly. So let's pull up Eglot. Sorry, whoa, that's some interesting images there. All right, so I think I saw Eglot ensure. So they're basically using Eglot ensure, which is probably not an interactive function. I would say it's more than likely a normal function. So Eglot ensure, yep, okay. So what I could then do is set this to use Eglot ensure instead. So I'm gonna basically update that hook to use Eglot ensure. And now I'm gonna run TypeScript mode again. Whoops. Oh boy. Okay, there we go. Okay, so did it run? There's a little icon here which tells me it probably did run. That's coming from Doom mode line. So this little rocket, if I hover over it, we can see Eglot is connected to the TypeScript language server, which is great. So let's see now. What if I try to use OAuth client? Do I get completions? Yep, looks like I get completions here. So I used Control-Alt-I to use completion at point. OAuth client dot Control-Alt-I. Okay, I'm getting completions. It's telling me things that are fields or methods. Add listener, open parens. All right, so I think that there's other functionality that you would normally get here that isn't being loaded, but then again, I think it must have turned LDoc mode on. Is LDoc on? Yeah, LDoc mode is on. I wonder if I turned that on. I probably did turn global LDoc mode on. So basically, what's happened here is I've turned on Eglot in this buffer. It connected to the language server, and all of a sudden, I'm automatically getting the ability to get completions at point. If I turn on company mode, it probably would work too. So company mode, OAuth client dot. Yeah, so company mode also just sort of works by default whenever you you have this turned on. I don't think LSP mode is on still. LSP, no. Yeah, so we're good there. So basically, either with a normal completion at point, using whatever completion system you use, like Ivy, etc., or using company mode, it seems to just pick this up by default, which is great. The other thing is, I already have LDoc mode turned on. If I turn LDoc mode off in this buffer, and I hover over a symbol or put my cursor on a symbol, we don't get any documentation strings. However, if I turn on LDoc mode, then all of a sudden we do start getting documentation strings in the echo area. Now, LDoc mode is a built-in mode into Emacs that it does this kind of functionality where you put your cursor on a symbol and it will give you the documentation string for it. Reason why it's called LDoc is because it's meant for Emacs Lisp, but I think they generalized the functionality so that it could be used for other modes as well. So basically, you put your cursor somewhere, LDoc reevaluates whatever, using whatever backend it uses to say what the documentation string is for the thing at point, and then it shows it in the echo area. So if I put my cursor over add listener, now it will tell me the signature for the add listener function, which is great. I mean, it's pretty useful to have that. If I put my cursor on the parenthesis, it doesn't tell me anything. So yeah, the one thing I don't know is if it can show signatures. So let's see about signatures here. Function signature hints. So one thing that you often need is to see what other possible signatures are available for a particular function. I wonder if they have a functionality for that. So LDoc or Eglot signature, no. Doc, no. Code action inline, find declaration. So there's a lot of functions here that actually do allow you to run certain things like formatting the buffer. Let's see if Eglot format works here. Eglot format. Okay, it didn't seem to do anything really. It may actually have because there's a couple lines that are edited, so it's possible it did something. Oh yeah, also a good point. Garjola says that it turns on fly make. So we can see that we do have a squiggly here, basically saying that it expects 2 arguments but got 0. And you can also see down here there's a little marker. Whoa, what's going on right now? Capital K? What's that supposed to do? Oh, I didn't know that. So apparently capital K in evil mode pulls up an LDoc buffer for the function. I wonder if that, whoops. I wonder if that works for functions that actually do have full documentation. Did I close that window again? No, it's here, great. Okay, so let's find one that does have docs. So this OAuth client does have docs. If I use capital K, it pulls up a whole buffer that gives me all this information, which is very nice if you need to have that. And then what else? So go to definition. Yes, absolutely, that it has that too. Someone pointed out, so it's alt period should work, but I think that evil mode is doing something to prevent that. So let's actually use xref find definitions on that. And it's trying to jump to that file, but it's giving me this prompt because I have dir locals set up. But it did actually jump there. No. Yeah, okay, so it jumped to that definition in this file. So basically, you're getting a lot of the same functionality that you would get from LSP mode, just without a lot of the extra user interface that LSP mode would bring into the game. One thing that you would normally see here is like there would be messages popping up on the right-hand side, the sidebar stuff basically that they have, which can be helpful in some cases. It tells you what all the code actions would be. Eglot also has code action functionality, which will tell you if there's any action at a current point. Let's see. Maybe if I have an unused variable, it can delete it. So var something equals no. I save the buffer. Okay, we see that there's a little bit of an exclamation point here, which means there's something. So if I run Eglot code actions here, it will have a listing for remove unused declarations. So I can press enter and allow it to do the edit, and it will remove it. So apparently you can do code actions with Eglot as well, just the same as you can with LSP mode. So I can see why people would be interested in using this, because it does seem to make the experience more well polished and integrated into Emacs. However, you do lose some of the things that LSP mode can do. I also don't know whether DAP mode for debugging kind of requires things from LSP mode, and maybe it's going to turn on LSP mode by default whenever you try to use it. That's something you might want to watch out for if you're trying to use Eglot mode with DAP mode. So I haven't tried that yet. I'm not sure exactly what will happen. Maybe we could try it now and see if something bad happens. Let's see. Matthew says, for what it's worth, you can disable most of the UI elements from LSP if you're looking for a more streamlined experience. Yep, you can definitely do that. You can turn off a lot of that stuff. But he said, I've decided loading something as huge as LSP wasn't worth it anymore. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of code that does come with LSP mode. Some of it's not turned on by default, but the sort of framework for LSP mode is pretty big because there's a lot of things that have to hook into that. So it's something to keep in mind if you want to have smaller packages, maybe that impact the startup time of Emacs less, then Eglot could be a good option for that. Though I haven't actually looked at the source of Eglot to see how big it is by comparison, so we could do that really quickly. By the way, hey Leo. So there appears to be one file, eglot.el. How big is it? Oh, it's about 3,000 lines. However, that's not too bad, I would say, for the functionality here. And it does have built-in support for a lot of different language servers. So basically, it has this Eglot server programs variable where you have an alias that configures which language servers get loaded for which modes. So if you want to use a language server that's not in this list, like let's say, I don't see one for F# here or anything else, you could add it to this list, but it does have a lot of knowledge about certain language servers by default. And you may also want to consult this if you want to know which language server it's going to look for by default. So for instance, for TypeScript, it's using the TypeScript language server. There's a few different ones you could use, but this is the one that it picks. So if you want to know which one it's trying, you can look at this variable to find out. And for Java, they're using the Eclipse JDT. Oh, it actually has its own custom function. So there seems to be a lot of stuff you can do here. Basically, tell it a program to run with arguments, or even give it a function to call that might return a process back. Since a lot of this communication with the language server is being done over like the process boundary using standard IO. All right. Yeah, so it has quite a lot. Hey, Eric. It has quite a lot of languages already hooked up in it, so it could be very useful if you want that. And it could be pretty instructive looking at the source code for this, just to see what kind of things they're doing in here. Yeah. But, you know, I haven't used it very much, but the fact that I was able to get it up and running so fast with literally just like one line of code and then some already built-in stuff is pretty promising, I think. So Eglot mode map. Let's see what bindings it already has set up. Okay, so that's useful. So by default, in Eglot mode map that gets turned on whenever you have the Eglot package turned on, capital K, as we saw before, is ldoc doc buffer. So basically it gives you the full documentation buffer for whatever's under the point. GD gives you fine definitions functionality. I'm guessing this has to be only in evil mode. That'd be kind of weird. Oh, it's binding it in normal state, which makes sense. That's evil mode's normal state. Otherwise, control H dot gives you ldoc doc buffer. So not much there already for key bindings, which is not so bad because it just means you get to choose what you want the bindings to be for this. And if you go to the main page of the Eglot site, I think it tells you about all of the commands that you might want to run so that you can bind those. Yeah, commands and key binding. So basically a lot of things here that you might want to bind, and also customization information, and some explanation basically of how it works. One other thing that we haven't talked about in this channel yet that's kind of interesting is the inbuilt project.el. I haven't really looked into that much yet, but basically it's a built-in minimal project. I wouldn't say management, it's like code projects, basically, sort of like Projectile. So we've talked about Projectile a few times on this channel. And if you want a package that is like Projectile, but has a lot less functionality built in, that's just sort of like the bare minimum that you need for managing code projects, project.el could be a good option for that. And to fit in with Eglot's view of the world, where we should be using things that are built into Emacs, it uses project.el to figure out what the project root of the file that you opened is for the purpose of loading the language server and pointing it at that folder. So yeah, completion endpoint, LDoc mode, FlyMake mode, xref find definitions, project.el, all that stuff is built into Emacs, at least from Emacs 26, I think. And then some extra features are provided if they're loaded, like YaSnippet, or the documentation can be given extra markup if you use the markdown mode. And also, if company is turned on, it can figure that out and use company for completions. So it doesn't need these, but if you have them installed, then you get some extra functionality for that. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty cool package, and I definitely recommend people check it out if you want to try something different and still get a lot of the same functionality that you would get from LSP mode. However, I don't want to discourage anybody from using LSP mode, because I think it's a great package and there's a really great, vibrant community that's built up around that. So any of them are good options, I think. It really just depends on your own tastes and your personal requirements and what your sort of philosophy is for how things should work in Emacs. I know there's a lot of people out there who would prefer to stick with the things that are built into Emacs by default and only resort to outside packages when necessary. So this could be a good package to sort of bridge that gap for IDE functionality. Yeah, so if you're that type of person, if you really like to use the things that are built into Emacs, then you should give Eglot a try. I think it's pretty cool. So let's see. So, Narxel, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, how do you make the help menu look like that? I'm using vanilla without Doom. Yeah, it's the helpful package. I really not sure which one you're asking about. If you're asking about like Control HV and getting this listing, that's all from Ivy. So I'm using Ivy to drive the completions for this. And then whenever I do load up a variable, then it gives me extra information from the helpful package. So instead of using describe variable, I'm using helpful variable, I believe it's called. Helpful variable. Yeah, so I've got that bound to Control HV instead. And that basically gives you the ability to get more help text, basically, whenever you're looking at the help for a given function or variable or whatever. It gives you a lot more output for the contents of mode maps. It gives you source code where the thing is defined, which is really helpful if you're trying to understand how something is working. So I find it to be a very useful package. Let's see. Yeah, Matthew mentions that there's an issue on the Eglot repo that the LSP author opened where the differences between the two are highlighted. And there does seem to be a little bit of animosity somehow. I'm not exactly sure why people are sort of upset about this, because it's great to have, options for different things. If you don't want to have to use one package, there's always another package to use. So there's really no need to have animosity between package authors. Sometimes it can be a thing where the communities around a given package might sort of be seeing themselves as warring factions or something, where they basically think that they have to be against the people that use the other thing. I really think that's not a good mindset, because in the end, it's all about what's useful for you. And if you want to turn a particular Emacs package into a battleground against somebody else, then it's kind of like a waste of time. I mean, you could just be spending your time hacking on your Emacs config instead of arguing with people about which one is the better language server package. That's just my opinion, though. That's a good point, Ellis. Basically saying that Control HF will tell you if a function is natively compiled. I haven't seen that yet, so let me see. What about org dash? That's probably a bad option for this. Let's see. Okay, so org mode says it's interactive and natively compiled. So we are getting extra information now about which functions are being natively compiled. So if you are unsure if a package that you're using or a function that you're using has functions that are being natively compiled correctly or not, you can check the help to tell you to see whether it is actually natively compiled. Yeah. I mean, what Matthew says is true. There's nothing wrong with LSP people migrating towards Eglot. It shouldn't discourage you. We're all just trying something new. I mean, basically, when you get into this whole world of system crafting and, sort of crafting your Emacs configuration and whatever else, there's a tendency to constantly be refining things or trying new things, partly because it's fun, and partly because sometimes, the things you're using, while they're working pretty well, maybe there's things that you don't necessarily like. So you're trying another option to see if there's something new to be learned or something that is better for your particular workflow. So, recently I've tried a couple of the different completion frameworks. I use Ivy, and I like Ivy a lot, but I also did try Selectrum, and I also tried iComplete Vertical, which is more closely aligned to the built-in iComplete completion system in Emacs. And they're great. I think it's really cool, the possibilities with Selectrum and Consult and Embark, etc. However, I had some trouble with those inside of EXWM. Something about the height of the mini buffer kept getting broken, where I couldn't actually see my buffer list anymore when I tried to switch buffers. So I probably would have switched to Selectrum already or iComplete Vertical already if I didn't have that problem. But since I did, I had to stick with Ivy. However, it's not a bad thing because Ivy is great and it does a lot of really good things. So I don't know, it's sort of this constant refinement. You're kind of like trying new things that you hear about to try to see if they're better. And maybe you try them for a while and they don't work out so well and you roll back to the thing you were using before. It's sort of everybody's unique journey to figure out what the best configuration is, the best set of packages is for you and your workflow. And I think that's part of what's so awesome about it. It's just, it's your own custom thing. The way that I have my system set up is not the way that you're gonna have yours set up. So there's really no reason for anybody to fight over what's the best, because it's all subjective in the end. I mean, there may be some objective reasons to use one thing versus another, but in many cases, it's very subjective. Which PR? Fenton says that he sent a pull request on Emacs from scratch if I want to try Lispy again today. If we have time, I might do that. We'll see. So, Ellis, which PR do you have that I haven't merged yet? So I will mention also, I apologize to the people who have sent PRs to the Emacs from scratch repo. Some of them I haven't merged because they're adding improvements to the configuration that don't line up with what we've been doing in the series. And I'm kind of trying to keep that repo focused on the improvements we actually do make on that series. Now that the series is like basically slowed down, we don't do very many videos on it anymore, it doesn't make as much sense to prevent PRs from being merged. However, I still kind of have that in the back of my mind. One thing that we might do is make a separate repo for a community authored configuration that is not meant to be used as a day-to-day config, but more like, here are some cool things that you can try in your config, and here's like an easy testing ground to go and load this config up and see how it works. Ellis, yeah, the auto install all the icon fonts. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that would be useful. I did see that PR. Leo asks the very polarizing question, what are the benefits that Emacs has over Vim? I don't think that, I think we should talk about that, but not necessarily right now, because I want to prepare more of a point on that. But the high level point is that it really just depends on what you want. For me, the benefit of Emacs is that I get to use Emacs Lisp to customize my environment. And there's so many packages that have customization hooks with Emacs Lisp that I can basically craft my Emacs configuration to do whatever I want. Now, a lot of people would say, oh yeah, you could probably do that too with Vim or with NeoVim. Sure, that's fine. But NeoVim can't do what EXWM does. So it all comes down in the end to what you want to do with your computer. And for me, I prefer to live in a Lisp environment. Everything top to bottom, basically in my configuration is Lisp, from my Linux distribution to my my service management code, like with Shepherd and with Emacs. The only thing that is not Lisp based right now is my browser, because I'm not using Nixt yet. I'm still using Qt browser, but that may change. So that's sort of my own personal preference. I'm a very big fan of Lisp, and that's my main reason for using it over Vim. Yeah, Ella says, I feel like that's a whole other stream. Yeah, we probably should just dedicate one. I was thinking about doing an actual video for that. Some of these chat topics would also be good video topics, but I don't want to talk about the same thing twice. So I'm kind of trying to decide whether I want to do that as a video or a stream. Ella says, NeoVim will soon be Lispable. Yeah, that's true, but I probably still won't use it unless it can do what Emacs does, and that's probably not going to happen. Mary says you can use Vim in Emacs. Yeah, there's a few ways to do that. Some are more ridiculous than others, but it's possible. Evil mode being the most obvious way to do that. Let's see. So yeah, I think we probably covered enough on Eglot for the moment because it's so simple and straightforward. There's not a whole lot to say. So I might try doing some alternating videos on LSP mode in Eglot. I really do want to get back into the Emacs IDE series very soon and make a video either about C and C++ or Java, since a lot of people have been asking for those languages. It's been a while, and I'm trying to come up with a way to rotate the series that I'm doing so that I have more variety in the videos I'm doing once per week. So like last week I did, or this week I did Emacs Lisp. Next week I'm actually going to do a video for beginners to Emacs, I think. I'm trying to get that set up now. Basically, the idea is that the Emacs from Scratch series was not really intended for beginners, and a lot of people in the comments of that video have mentioned, hey, this is not really friendly to beginners. Well, it wasn't meant for beginners. Maybe some beginners have actually benefited from it, but it's not necessarily meant for someone who is only just opened to Emacs for the first time. So I want to do a video next week about, you know, basically Emacs for beginners and talking about the things that are in box, the concepts of Emacs, how you use Emacs just in the sort of day-to-day basic use cases like opening buffers, basic window management, you know, anything that you would expect to do in a text editor the first time you open it up. So I think that that's really the next thing I'll do. And then I want to rotate to something else, like either Emacs IDE or maybe get started on the Geeks series, because I really like, there's a lot of excitement being built in the System Crafters Discord right now about Geeks. There's a lot of people trying Geeks for the first time and having some success with it. So I think I want to capitalize on that and start the Geeks series, firstly talking about how to use Geeks as a package manager in another distro like Ubuntu or something. So it's a good time to start that series now because I've finished up some of the other things I wanted to talk about, and I've got a situation set up now where I can have a separate computer to show an actual Geeks installation with a laptop and not with a VM, because it will be a more realistic demonstration, I guess, of setting up Geeks on a real machine. So now that everything's in place, I think that we're going to go into that series, which I think will be a lot of fun. Ellis says, I vote for deprecate Java already. Well, I don't really use Java. I mean, Clojure kind of depends on the JVM, so I wouldn't deprecate Java entirely, but maybe the language itself could go. Let's see. Yeah, more learning Emacs Lisp videos. Those are a lot of fun. They're also a little bit difficult to prepare because I'm trying to keep the right balance between just basically reading the documentation versus like doing practical examples. So this last episode this week was an experiment in trying to have a little bit more middle ground between that, where we cover some things about like what the functions are, and then we do an example, and then we go back into some more coverage. So I think it worked out fairly well. Maybe you folks can tell me what you think about that, but I think we came up with something pretty good in the end. So I was happy with how it turned out. Amal Vedya says, Vedya, Amal Vedya, I'm sorry, I'm definitely butchering your name. Beginners have definitely benefited from your Emacs from Scratch series. I think some people who have familiarity with customizing editors like Vim, etc., probably can get picked up on that pretty easily, but others who are maybe migrating from Visual Studio Code or JetBrains editors or whatever probably have a harder time because things are so different in Emacs compared to conventional editors that it really requires sort of resetting your expectations about what you should be doing by default in an editor. So I need to help to explain those concepts to someone who's using it for the first time, so they have a better mental model of how to use Emacs. And then from there, basically I'm going to try to do like a whole video that just goes through the basics for people, maybe like an hour long or something. And then the subsequent videos are going to be not necessarily geared towards beginners so much, but basically to describe the inbuilt functionality in Emacs, like the editing key bindings or some of the other built-in packages, so that we can start covering what's in the box in Emacs and then gradually build up a configuration for Emacs using only built-in stuff. I think that should be pretty fun because we might be able to see that there is, you know, you can get quite far with just the in-the-box stuff. You don't necessarily need all the external packages. So if you know what's in the box and you know how to use it very well, then maybe you can reduce the number of external packages you use and have a more streamlined Emacs experience. So I think that would be a pretty cool thing to try to do. Igor says, David, are you open to proposals about what packages to show and present to the audience? Maybe even some packages I haven't personally used yet. Absolutely. I would love to get recommendations because there's plenty of things I don't know about in Emacs or packages I don't know about. So I would love to hear about ones that I haven't seen yet. Now, whether I can give good coverage on a package I don't know much about or a package for something that I don't do personally, like I don't do data science really. So me doing a demonstration of a package on R probably won't be as interesting as something else that I know pretty well. But I'm definitely interested in any suggestions that people have for videos. You can either file those on the Emacs from Scratch repo or on the comments of videos, or come into the Discord and give your suggestions. Or if you are a sponsor, then you can come to the video planning repo in the System Crafters GitHub org and suggest things there as well. Anders, what is tram? I haven't heard of that. Are you or do you mean tramp? Tramp? Yeah. Oh, Erica says Circe is a great IRC program. You know, talking about the IRC clients in Emacs would be pretty fun. I definitely want to do that because I've used ERC and Circe and RCIRC, and they're all good in their own ways. I would love to do that. Ella says maybe guest spots for those kinds of videos. I really want to figure out how to do that. I would love to find a way to integrate other people into the show in a way that makes sense, that isn't sort of kludgy, and it also would have to require somebody being available at the time that I'm streaming to do that. But definitely, I would like to do that. Piotr says, Geeks content would be gold, literal config for Geeks in org. Yeah, we're going to get there. I think that the ultimate goal of a lot of what we're doing this year is to get to a point where I'm going to show you how to basically make the same kind of configuration that I have, where you have your entire system configured with Geeks and Emacs using org mode. So that should be pretty cool. Eric says the first episode of that should be how to set a theme, as that is very important to know. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pull that off in the first episode, because I don't think anybody wants to look at a white background the entire video. So I'm going to have to cheat a little bit and say that I've already set that up and then explain how to do it. But yeah, I think that I'm going to have to at least set the font to something else for that video, because I don't want to be blinded while I'm making it. So that makes sense. Astrocat says, I think some distros put different packages in with Emacs. I don't know if they have default configs. That would be pretty weird if they did that. I personally wouldn't like that if they had some default config, but maybe they do. Poonam says, hello, sir, help me. Okay, what's your question? F23A hash none. I'm not sure what kind of name that is. I apologize for not saying it right. Do you plan to do videos on other customizable software, MPV, Qt Browser, TMUX, etc., or mostly Emacs? Yes, I absolutely do plan to do that. I was going to do a video in the Emacs Desktop Environment series on how to use Qt Browser with EXWM. As you can see here, I'm using Qt Browser, and I can switch to different buffers, basically, browser tabs, effectively. I don't know why all of a sudden it decided not to switch, but basically I can switch between these as they are different buffers, and it's all different windows of Qt Browser. So I definitely want to do a video on how to set that up, because I think it's a pretty interesting way to use your browser in Emacs. Poonam asks, you can use MVC.NET Core. I have not touched ASP.NET MVC in a very long time, especially on .NET Core, so I don't think I can help you there, unfortunately. Let's see. Martin asks, video about org roam. Yeah, I've got some plans about org roam. I'm definitely going to do a video series at the very... Uh-oh. Did my screen freeze? Yep, it froze again. You know, I'm going to switch back to the other computer now, because we're done with this part. So let me see. 1 second. All right, I think that you can see now my main screen. Just give me 1 second to pull that back up. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of that computer and go back to the main computer. I'm doing a lot of computer Jenga here. I'm just got them stacked up. Okay, can you see everything now? All good? So I've forgotten now what I was talking about, but I think it was about the other programs like Qt Browser, etc. So yeah, so part of the reason of this channel is not just to talk about Emacs, but to talk about the other programs that you might want to use to sort of craft your own full system configuration. And once you've got your desktop environment figured out and your system configuration figured out, then you're going to want to think about other programs like your web browser, video players, ES or RSS feed readers, lots of other things that are like application level programs that you might want to configure in a way that is very convenient for you. So we're definitely going to talk about those things very soon. Aspercat says we can see PGP fingerprints. Yep, that's just this channel introduction right here. Let's see. Piotr says one language to rule them all. Anders says there are no such language. I don't know. I mean, like Lisp is pretty good, but maybe it doesn't do everything. So Murad says not a package, but the next thing to test is the Nixt browser. I almost looked at Nixt today. I actually played with Nixt a bit this week to sort of, you know, brush back up on it. I definitely want to do a video on that very soon, either a video or a stream, I think very soon. Thank you, Martin. You reminded me now. Org Rome. So, Org Rome. I have been using it. I like it a lot. I think there's a lot to get out of using it, and I'm definitely going to do a video series on basically showing you how to use it. I'm also thinking about possibly doing a book on Org Rome, which I've started planning, but I haven't really started writing yet. So, if you're interested in that, let me know, because I might try to get some people to review it early for me once I start making progress on that. Let's see. What other programs are you talking about? Yeah, let's see. What other programs do I use personally? I don't even remember. Like, most of the day, I'm just switching between whatever Emacs buffer I have to like Discord and the browser. So I'm not using many other actual programs at the moment, I think. Yeah, Org Rome is really cool. There's a lot of cool ideas there. Garjola says music played with EMMS. I don't actually use EMMS because I use Spotify on my phone most of the time. But EMMS is great, and I do want to cover it. David Jeter says, what is Org Rome? It's basically an extension to Org Mode that is meant for... it's basically an Org Rome implementation of a program called Rome Research, which is a kind of like a personal wiki tool to sort of simplify it a little bit, but they say it's a note-taking tool for networked thought. So if you've ever used something like Workflowy, or what's it called? Jeez, I've forgotten the name of it now. I actually have it installed on my phone. Workflowy versus Dynalist, those kind of programs. This is something like that, but it's more like a wiki, and it also lets you link to various notes and see them more like in a graph. And the idea is that you would apply this sort of concept called Zettelkasten, or Zettelkasten. Somebody correct my pronunciation, because I'm not saying that right. I'm certain. Basically, meaning that you make individual little small notes based on single concepts. So you try to make notes based on the smallest concepts possible, and then link them together. And by doing that, you get more of a network of knowledge that you've built up over time, rather than just having like a big notes file for one big topic area that you've wrote a lot of stuff in. It's more useful if you have more of a network of knowledge that you can draw from. So if you have a note that has a lot of links from other notes, you can find all of that and then see it, which is pretty interesting. Thank you very much, Tom Elliott, for the £5 in Super Chat. I appreciate that. That's great. So it's very interesting, and it also integrates with everything in org mode, like the agenda or capture templates or clocking tasks or all that kind of stuff. So I've been building up a new sort of productivity system for myself using Org Rome, and it does provide some extra benefits for that. You could get a lot of the same benefits with Org Mode, but I think that the linking between notes actually solves a big problem I've had with Org Mode in the past, which is basically about organizing information. So I think it's a very interesting package. It's a very useful package. Let me see what else we got here. Astrocat asks, do I use IRC inside of Emacs? I don't use IRC very much, but when I do, I use ERC. Sometimes when I need to go to the free node IRC network, I use that. Mary says, natively compiled Emacs 28 on Mac OS even scrolls more smoothly. That's pretty interesting if that's the case. Leo says, I only have a Windows machine. Where can I get a Geeks build that will work on a non-free BIOS? Yes, so I want to help provide one of those. I build my own installation media from basically a configuration for Geeks, and I make that for myself to install on a USB stick to install Emacs, sorry, to install Geeks. But that's something that I could easily provide to people. So when I get into making the Geek series, I am going to provide an image that you can use so that you don't have to build it yourself, because it is a little bit of a pain if you don't have a Linux install already. Hayworth Software asks, how should we let you know that we're interested in participating with your org roam efforts? Good question. Either file an issue on the Emacs from scratch repo. That's github.com /DavyWills/Emacs from scratch. I can leave that in the show. Actually, it's in the show notes. If you look in the show notes, I think it's there. Or in the description. And then either that or ping me on Twitter at SystemCrafters. That's also another option. Just try to find me somehow. I think that's the best thing. Just find me however you can find me. Let's see. Mr. 22B says, can I cover a setup for C, C++? Yes, I'm definitely going to do that soon. Mary says, Chettelkasten, based on their German classes. Yeah, maybe that's right. Garjola says, web is browsed with EWW, command line is steered with eShell, tmux is useless with Emacs. Yeah, tmux is not really important whenever you have Emacs. EWW, I've not really found a comfortable way to use that yet, but I think that there's a package that might make that better. I can't remember the name of it right now. Mary says, just open a larger closure file and it's still buttery. That's cool. Ellis says, add an org room on the Discord. Yeah, I should do that, actually. So I don't have the Discord pulled up right now, but we will add an org room channel. Actually, Ellis, you might be able to create that if you want to. So you can also come to the System Crafters Discord, which is a great place to talk about anything. But if you want to know more about the org roam stuff as it happens, definitely show up there. Igor says, will C++ setup include irony and R tags? Well, I hadn't considered it because I was just going to do LSP mode, and I don't think you need those with LSP mode. But one thing I would like to do with some of these IDE videos is to show an LSP mode setup, but then also show alternate setups, because there's a lot of packages that people have been using for years for different languages like Python, etc., to get IDE functionality in Emacs before LSP mode ever came along or a language server protocol ever came along. So basically, I would like to cover those as well, just to give people options, because we don't all have to use LSP mode. We can use other things too, but you know, LSP mode is an obvious thing to cover first. Jerry, thanks so much for the $10 Canadian in Super Chat. I really appreciate it. I like it. I watch Dr. Disrespect's live streams, and whenever someone gives him a donation in Canadian dollars, he always calls it California dollars. So I should start doing that. Let's see. Astrocat says, I thought the main benefit of tmux is to run it on the remote machine so your running processes don't get killed if your connection goes down. That is one good reason to do it. However, you can do that with Emacs also, because you can run Emacs and have it basically act as if it's tmux, and then use SSH to shell into that machine that has your Emacs session open. So that's also a pretty funny way to use Emacs if you want to do that. S4 Writer asks, for the knowledge management system, have you played with org mode and mind maps? I have not, actually. I think there's like org brain. Is that one of them that does the mind maps? I haven't really used that yet, but I've seen it. Matthew Marquez says, Pepperidge Farm remembers Jedi.el. Which one is that for? Is that for Python, or is that something else? Andre says that OCaml and Merlin is as good as LSP mode. Yeah, I've heard Merlin is really good for OCaml. And Chen says LPy for Python. Whenever I did the video on Python development setup, people were like, oh, you should have covered LPy. Well, I definitely want to do that because it sounds like it's pretty good. So I'd like to try it. Mr. 22B says, have you tried Super Agenda? I have tried it. And it basically just seems like it gives you a simpler syntax to use to specify your agenda, your custom agendas. So I tried it a little bit and didn't get very far with it because I have my own agenda set up already. But I'd be interested to learn more about how like you could do really cool stuff with that. So I haven't done it yet. Mary says Cider is very good for Clojure. Yeah, that's the one that's been going on for a while for Clojure and ClojureScript. But apparently LSP mode for Clojure has gotten a lot better. I see Bork Dude talking about it all the time on Twitter. Basically all the features of LSP mode for Clojure. So that's interesting. I didn't expect that Clojure would actually have better. Jeez. Okay, this is a great day for Super Chat, apparently. Thank you so much, Fenton, for the $20 California in Super Chat. I appreciate that. So let's see. Fenton, I will definitely check out your PR as well, and we may have a little bit of time for that in a second. Let's see. Eric says, is there a way to get the X window inside of Emacs Experience without running EXWM, and would you show if that exists? There is something about Emacs X widgets. I don't remember Emacs X widgets. There's a way to embed X widgets into Emacs. Embedded native widgets. Now, I don't think this works with everything. I think this only works with certain things, and it may just be controls and not full applications. WebKit. So apparently there's some way to embed WebKit browsers into Emacs, but I don't know exactly what's required for that. If it's behind like a compiler flag or something, it may be like with X widgets or something. And in the R, apparently there is a Emacs X widgets package that does apparently use this. Let's just take a look at the package build real quick. Yeah, -- with X widgets. And they're even doing GTK3 there. Interesting. So yeah, that's one way, but I don't know how well that works. And then there's also the Emacs application framework, EAF, if you've heard of it before. Basically, it provides a way to integrate Qt-based user interface elements into Emacs. I have not used it yet, but a lot of people have said that it works pretty well. So you can do things like, you know, embed your webcam or video player or a lot of other things into Emacs. So I haven't tried it, but that's another thing that you can do if you want to have an EXWM-like experience without using EXWM. Anders says, if you're going to use a WSL2 and Emacs setup, you might take a look at GWSL for getting an X server. What is GWSL? GWSL X11. Haven't heard of that one, I don't think. GWSL manual. Is this like an open source thing? That would be great. Highly integrated Windows 10 X server. Yeah, if this is open source, then that would be good. I agree, it's not great if you have to pay for those. I think Ellis said that. Let's see. Xwidgets WebKit go-to URL. Does that actually work? Will it work if I do that? How about duckduckgo.com? Yeah, your Emacs was not compiled with Xwidget support. So it probably would work if you did compile with Xwidget support. Anders says that the GWSL is free and in store, if I pronounced that correctly again. AstroCat says our servers just have Emacs no X. That makes sense because no X is the version of Emacs that is just terminal based. So that's probably what you want on a server. You don't want to have to run UI on a server. Eric says I prefer Qt over GTK. Yeah, I mean it's pretty good. Letube says would love the Emacs beginners video. I think knowing more of the fundamentals would get me more comfortable with all the fancy stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much the idea I have, is that it's easy to start using something like Spacemacs or Doom Emacs and be really productive with it and enjoy using it. But at some point, if you really want to take your knowledge further, you have to start understanding what's built in. And even what we've been doing in the Emacs from Scratch series, we've been sort of like taking Emacs and then building up on it using external packages in a lot of cases. So it's better to know what's in the box already so that you know more of what is available. I think there were some questions I missed up here before. Got distracted by all the nice donations. So Bernard asked, how often do you uninstall packages, remove some functionality versus installing, adding new functionality? I try to remove things if I'm not using them so that my config doesn't get too bloated. If you look at my actual Emacs config file, I have a lot of stuff in there that's been there for a while that I don't use, and I just kind of keep it around in case I decide to use it again. But I'm overdue for a cleanup. So I think what happens with a lot of people is that you'll add a lot of stuff and maybe you don't go back and clean it up very frequently because you don't have to. Maybe you can turn it off and it doesn't really affect your config. However, if it's installing packages and you have packages sitting around that you don't use, then you could say that might, negatively impact your startup time to some degree. But it's not necessarily a requirement that you go clean it all up all the time, but it can be a fun thing you do. Like if you're bored or maybe you want to procrastinate, like you have an assignment to do at school or at work, and you want something to do to sort of forget that you have to do that thing, then go clean up your Emacs config and delete all the packages you don't use anymore. Let's see. Mary says, I hope I don't get stuck in Windows anytime soon. Yeah, me either. And Ella says, being stuck in Windows is not fun. I agree completely. It's not fun. And Anders and Martin are both talking about using Tramp to do things remotely on other machines. Tramp is pretty cool. You get mixed reports from people who use it, who some say that it's like a lifesaver and some who say that it causes performance problems in Emacs for various reasons. It really just matters how you use it, I think. I need to do a video on that at some point because like Anders mentions here, it's not just for editing remote files. You can actually use it to edit files as sudo or as root on your machine. Sometimes if you need to edit a file in like your /etc folder or something, like some config file that's there, you can't edit it in Emacs because you're running as your user level account. So you can use Tramp to do elevation to the root user to have access to write to those files that are not the user files. They're like the system files. So that's pretty useful for that. But I don't personally use it very frequently. I don't really have to in Geeks because the configuration is done using the actual configuration syntax rather than editing system config files. So, or like files in like /etc or /user or whatever. I don't ever have to do that. So I don't have that problem anymore. What else have I missed here? Yuri says, since you touched running Emacs in Tmux, would you know a way to edit files remotely which sucks less than Tramp mode? I'm stuck in console Emacs because of that. Yeah, not really. I think that's basically it. What you could do is you could use a Fuse file system to, excuse me, to tunnel an SSH session as a file system and basically edit files remotely like that. That's a little bit of an arcane art, I think. Let's see, Fuse over SSH, if I can find that really quickly. But it is possible. I actually used to do that. SSHFS, to mount remote directories over SSH. So basically, you would be editing them on your local machine as if they were local, but you're actually doing it over the remote connection. So when you save it locally, it basically gets mirrored onto the server. So if you want to look into that, look up SSHFS, and you should be able to figure out how to set that up. That can be an alternative to using Tramp if you don't want to use Tramp. Yuri says, well, Fuse is slow too. Yeah, I mean, anything is going to be slow to some degree if you're trying to do things remotely like that. So, I mean, the best option sometimes is just to SSH into the server and have an editor there that can deal with it. But Tramp can work for a lot of people in a lot of cases. And it can be really useful if you are doing a lot of remote management of a variety of different servers and you need to have a way to get those, get access to those quickly without having to go and SSH into a session and then like install Vim or install Emacs and do all that stuff. Tramp can be more convenient in that case, but there is the drawbacks of it being a little bit slow sometimes. Astrocat says they do most system stuff with Ansible. Yeah, that makes sense. Pavel says, perhaps run the Emacs daemon on the remote machine. That also might be possible. I'm not sure. Has anybody actually connected to a remote Emacs daemon? That could be possible, but I haven't tried it. Demon. I say it the wrong way all the time. And Ellis is promoting his new project. If you want a nice prompt for eShell, you should check out eShell-p10k. Let's see. That is eShell-p10k, right? Yeah. eShell-p10k. Let's see if it will show up. No. You're not being indexed, Ellis. If you want to drop the link in the chat. Just checking to see how much time we have left here. Any other interesting thoughts or questions today? I'm trying to think if there's anything else interesting that showed up this week. One thing that actually I did see on Satya Chua's Emacs News post for this week, which is kind of an interesting idea. I don't know if this is what they really mean by this yet, but we'll see. Let's see. Satya Chua, Emacs News. Once it decides to load. Let's see if I can find it again. There's a commit. Okay, yeah. So in tabbar.el, so we've talked about tabbar mode in this channel before, and I'm sorry, I know this is extremely bright and I can't turn it to dark mode. Basically, there's a commit that just went in that says support displaying global mode string in the tab bar, possibly appended after tab bar format right align. So what this means is that in Emacs 28, there's going to be the possibility of showing an extra string in the tab bar mode. So if I pull up tab bar mode right now, you'll see that we have these tabs, right, at the very top of the screen. What that means is that you could actually put some other text on the tab bar up here for like your clock or your battery status or anything like that, basically with the same format as the mode line syntax. And this actually gets us closer to having a panel in Emacs. So if you use tab bar mode, you could have extra information being displayed here persistently so that you don't have to put your clock in your mode line. The thing I don't like about putting the clock and the battery status in the mode line is that you don't see it whenever you don't have it have a particular window focused. So if I go over here and click this window, if I had the clock displayed, you wouldn't see it at all because this is an inactive buffer or inactive window. So if we had a way to have a persistent, non-moving string that is displayed on the screen all the time that's built into Emacs, like up here in the upper right, that would be pretty awesome. And that plus the EXWM system tray feature would mean that you would not need, in theory, you wouldn't need to have Polybar or any other external bar anymore. You would just be able to have all Emacs UI on the screen if you use EXWM. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I am looking into using in the future. It just got added, so I haven't tried it yet. But now that I'm using the Emacs Native Comp branch, maybe those things are being merged back and I could try it out. So that'd be pretty cool. Piotr says that Sasha's been listening to me on Emacs News for quite some time. Yeah, I really appreciate her including me there because I think that some of my early viewers did come from that. Yeah, Windows is definitely slower for certain things. That's for sure. All right. Andre says that I could look into GNUs. I definitely want to look at GNUs at some point for sure. Yeah, Martin says you would have to use Emacs with your full config on the server. That would be weird to use that on like a production server. So yeah, it's not really a good option. I think the best option would just be using Tramp or maybe SSHFS for that. Pavel said someone proposed sharing Emacs daemon for pair programming, but haven't tried it though. Yeah, I don't know if that would actually work. Well, no, it would work to some degree, but it would probably be a little bit weird. So I don't know how good of an idea it is. I think there's another package that is for pair programming in Emacs, but I haven't tried it yet. So let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with like more topics to talk about on the live streams. This week we happen to have some stuff that showed up in the Discord that we were talking about native compilation and Eglot and whatnot. But I want to keep these streams being interesting and talking about interesting topics. To give you some more information about Emacs and system crafting in general. So if you have other ideas for topics we would like to discuss on the streams, definitely leave a note in the comments or in the chat or wherever else you can find me. The Discord is also a very good place because we've covered some pretty good topics so far, but it gets harder and harder over time to keep finding good things. So I'm very interested in anyone else's ideas on what we can talk about in the streams because this is a very fun environment. I really enjoy doing these streams and being able to talk with all of you. It's been really great for me at least. I also forgot I should turn this to live chat and not just top chat because sometimes YouTube is deleting things. Pair programming in Emacs would be great. It would be useful to show to my students. Yeah, I mean, that would be a cool way to be able to help somebody with their programming. Oh yeah, there we go, Ella. crdt.el. That's the one I was thinking of. So basically, there's this idea of CRDT, which is like I guess you could call it an algorithm, basically. It's a way of doing multiple cursor editing on a single file at the same time without it being disruptive. When I worked on the Atom editor, we were working on a package called Teletype that had that functionality, basically. CRDT. And it kind of that idea got really popular around that time, but I don't know if anybody talks about it anymore. Conflict-free replicated data type. So basically, it's a data structure that can be manipulated concurrently without having conflicts in it, which is kind of interesting. I don't really understand how it works, but I just know that it exists. Ramsey says, this week in Flutter keynotes, a main Google developer said that he uses Emacs as his IDE for developing Flutter. I think there's a lot of high-level developers in a lot of places who are using Emacs because it kind of one of those pieces of software that's very interesting to a person who likes writing code. So it doesn't surprise me that there's high-level people using Emacs in interesting places. EC Gade says, check out the papers and talks by the guys at Ink and Switch. They do a lot of CRDT work. And then Anders says the main Java developer uses Emacs. Yeah, I don't know. I think one thing I also see is there's a lot of people in university settings and research settings using Emacs. I find that to be really interesting to me. So I see a lot of really interesting people like checking out the channel and following on Twitter. So it gives me a lot of hope that there's a lot of smart people who enjoy using Emacs and are using it for cool things. So that's one thing I would like to do at some point is interview some of these people who are not necessarily software developers, but they do other interesting things and learn more about how they use Emacs. There was a really interesting post I saw on Reddit a few months ago where a lawyer was talking about how he uses Emacs basically to plan his sort of legal schedule and also writing his legal briefs and stuff. There's a lot of really interesting things he said he was using. So it's kind of interesting to think about the other people who are using Emacs. Martin Holler says John Wigley uses Emacs. Yeah, I think that goes without saying. Piotr says, it feels like Emacs is becoming more popular now. I mean, I think there is some more attention being paid to Emacs these days, maybe because, it's been there forever and people are curious. I think that it's good to sort of like for all of us to capitalize on that and try to help draw other people in, because I think it's a fun piece of software to use and people should learn about it. Matthew Marquez says restclient.el. I don't know what the context was for that one. Pavel says, I know only one person in my university who uses Emacs. Yeah, I don't personally know very many people in my own life who use Emacs. There's a couple of people at my job who I know use Emacs, but I don't know if they use it full time. They're not as enthusiastic as I am, I guess. Oh, restclient.el as future topics. That's actually a good idea. It's a pretty interesting package. Basically, having REST requests baked into like an org file or something and be able to execute them and see the results written out in your document there. If that's the one I'm thinking of. Yuri says, I have a feeling that Emacs starts to lose competition to Visual Studio. There's not really a competition, in my opinion. I mean, Visual Studio Code are made for people who are trying to write code and use an IDE. And a lot of those people are people who are doing this as a job or, in school or something, and they haven't really thought about other tools they might want to use. They're just using what is available and what works. So usually if someone goes and tries Emacs, it's not because that's what they're being told to use. It's because they heard about it and they are interested to use it. So it's a different kind of mentality and use case entirely. And I don't really see it as a competition so much as just like an alternative. So. Martin says, did an Emacs talk at my company. Some actually did try my configurator. Yeah, what happened to me is I did a presentation at work using org tree slide, and people were like, what is this? And then they all wanted to try out Emacs afterwards. So I'm not sure how that went in the end, but it did get some interest around. People mention Emacs to me a lot at work now. It's sort of like the in joke, where in meetings people will try to relate anything to Emacs to sort of get a rise out of me. Martin says, write an Emacs package on stream. Yeah, I will be doing that. I'm avoiding doing too much on the package that we're doing for the Emacs Lisp series because I don't want to get too far ahead. But once that is further along, I'm definitely going to spend more time writing Emacs Lisp code on the stream. I did get some feedback though that when I do write Emacs Lisp code on stream, sometimes certain people who haven't gotten as far in their knowledge of Emacs Lisp kind of feel left out. So I don't want people to feel like they're not included in what's going on in the stream because I'm doing something that seems like beyond their level of understanding. Yuri says, there's another topic for a stream, presentations in org mode. I did a video on that for org tree slide probably 2 or 3 months ago. However, I might want to do another one on org present because I've switched to using that recently. Let's see. Benoit says, I use Emacs with AsciiDoc, Plant UML to write technical plans for clients. That's pretty cool. I haven't used AsciiDoc much, but it seems pretty good. EC Gade says, I would like to see an example of live debugging Mocha tests with DSP. Yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually. Debugging any kind of test would be useful. Camelo says, want to chime in and some random praise for the channel and Discord. I've learned a lot since following your videos. Yeah, thanks a lot. This community has grown a lot more than I expected it would, and I'm having a lot of fun every day just chatting with the folks that are on Discord. A lot of them are here right now, and the people who talk to me every day, they know who they are. So yeah, it's been really cool, the whole thing. I feel like I've learned a lot even from the people who are coming by and talking about stuff. So it's been very, very useful. Piotr asks, David, do you use QWERTY, Colmac, Dvorak, or any other keyboard layout? I use QWERTY, even though I know it's subpar for various reasons. And I also use laptop keyboards all day. So probably all of you with the custom keyboards are like screaming right now because I'm, basically just using a laptop keyboard. I'm also, as an external keyboard, I use this. That is a ThinkPad compact USB keyboard. So this is like an external ThinkPad keyboard with the track point. So if you want to really see how sucked into ThinkPad mindset someone can get, that's your example. So yeah, I'm not using anything fancy as far as keyboards are concerned or keyboard layouts. I've thought about like Colmac before, but I don't know. I don't really feel like spending the time to relearn all the key mappings. A lot of people use Dvorak though. I know that. Ella says, happy hacking keyboard master race. Yeah, well, that does seem like a cool keyboard. I would like to experiment with some more keyboards for sure. Eric Cole 1 says, writing an Emacs Lisp function to generate NumPy doc strings from arguments, and I'm having indenting issues when inserting text into a Python mode buffer. Any way to get around this? You might want to check to see if electric indent mode is turned on because it might be auto indenting things for you when you don't want it to. So keep that in mind. I think when you use the insertion functions, it may trigger behavior that causes indentation to happen in Emacs. So you might want to check to see what modes are turned on. Huh, interesting. So Ella says it's the Vim keyboard. I wish I got it sooner. That's interesting. I didn't know that, so I'm kind of curious to learn what that means. Alan says I switched to Dvorak and the pain in the left hand went away in a week. That's interesting. For me, reaching for things with my right pinky, like, backspace, enter, etc., it does cause problems, especially when I'm doing a lot of repetitive editing. So it would be interesting to see if a different keyboard layout would actually help with that. Ramsey says Skeletor.el, future topic. What is Skeletor.el? It sounds awesome. Powerful project templates. Okay, Chris Barrett wrote that. He's a smart guy. Yeah, that's cool. That's sort of like Yeoman, probably, like a project template system. That's not bad. I'll star that. I don't think I've seen that before. Cool. Thanks for telling me that. I might actually look into that because that's useful. Okay, folks, I think that we're hitting the 2-hour mark here. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I know a lot of you are either at the end of your work day or in the early evening. Most of the folks in the US are probably too busy working to be here right now. So anyway, I think that's all. What is there anything else I wanted to say? Nope, that was it for the chat. So before we go, I just want to say thank you to my sponsors. And when I do that, I'm going to show you this cool thing. I'm going to control my OBS scene using the OBS WebSocket EL package that Satya Chua put together. So I'm hitting Super S. Now you can see all of my commands for OBS down here in the echo area. So I'm going to hit the P button for sponsor screen in my Hydra. So these people have decided to sponsor this channel and the work that I'm doing to make all these Emacs videos and do these live streams and, you know, the system crafters community in general. And I'm very thankful for their support. To be honest with you, the support from these people has kept me going many times whenever I've thought about giving up, just because I don't want to let them down, and I feel so good knowing that people actually appreciate the work that I'm doing. So if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of this channel, definitely check out the 2 links I have below in the description. There's GitHub sponsors, which is my preferred, and also Patreon. Thank you very much, Yuri, for the €15 super chat. I really appreciate that. There's also super chat that you can do whenever we're on live streams, and we have a PayPal link in the description below if you want to do one-time donation. Whatever you want to do is great. If you don't want to do anything, that's also fine, because we're just here to have fun, so it doesn't really matter. So next week, like I said, we're going to be doing a video for beginners on Emacs. We'll see if I can get that out on Monday. I'm a little bit behind on preparation, so I'll try to do that for Monday or Wednesday. And then Friday, we'll be back with another live stream. So definitely come back again. Thank you all for being here today. We've had about 110 people the whole time, so that's pretty amazing. So thank you all for spending your time today to chat about all this fun stuff. I really appreciate it. And with that said, hope you have a great weekend. And until next time, happy hacking. Thanks a lot.